Is it just me, or does it feel like the art world is having a bit of an existential crisis right
Oh,
now?
definitely. Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are diving into a topic today that is causing huge debate, artists versus AI. And I have to say, you guys sent in a ton of stuff for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've got opinions from The Atlantic, we've got Medium in there, news reports from NPR, ArtNet, even some really, really passionate takes from artists over on Reddit. It gets intense.
It's really interesting to see how quickly things are changing, even just in the few months since generative AI has become so prevalent. This isn't just a tech shift. It's really challenging how we define art and creativity in a really fundamental way.
And challenging it fast. Like, whoa, hold on a second. A lot of artists are saying theft. They're feeling like AI is coming for their livelihood, is coming for their creativity. What is behind that really strong reaction, do you think?
Well, if you think back, artists have always been inspired by each other.
Right.
They learn by copying old masters. They're building on techniques that came before. It's just part of the process.
Mm.
But what's different about AI is the scale and the speed at which it can absorb and reproduce data. I mean, it's unprecedented. And I think that's what's freaking people out a little
The
bit.
scope of it, it's just,
Yeah.
it's moving so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And this class action lawsuit, it's actually mentioned in one of the ArtNet articles you sent against Stability AI, DeviantArt, and
Yeah.
Midjourney.
Yeah.
This gets to the heart of it.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, because a judge actually ruled that the artists have a case for copyright infringement, which is huge.
Huge, yeah.
This could set a legal precedent for how we determine ownership of art in the age of AI.
Yeah, and I think that's what's making people nervous because it's like, well, if we don't even know who owns what, then
Exactly.
where do we go from here,
Yeah.
And that leads us to the other thing that everyone's arguing about online. Is AI a tool or is it something else?
Oh,
Is it
yes.
making art?
Well, think about it this way. Painters, sculptors, they've always adopted new tools and new mediums, right? But those tools didn't create art on their own. The artist was still the driving force. The AI, though, can generate images autonomously just based on these massive data sets of existing art. And I think that's a really key difference.
It can just go do its own thing, which is
Yeah.
kind of...
Yeah. And it's fueling anxieties, not just in the art world, but really in any industry where people are worried about automation replacing jobs. It's that fear, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And the Reddit threads are very much, is it coming for my job? Is it not coming for my job? Like, it's...
Exactly.
Some artists are saying, it's fine, it's just a tool, it's like a fancy Photoshop brush.
It's another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to use it to do my thing. But then there are other artists who are saying, no way, this is fundamentally different. Machines don't have a soul. They don't have intent. They haven't lived a human life, so what they make can't be art.
Right. It really
Yeah.
makes you question, where do we draw the line between being inspired by something and just replicating it? And what does it even mean for art to have a soul?
Yes. It's a total mind warp trying to wrap your head around all this. One of the things I was reading, I think it was in the Medium article, was that a bunch of musicians are now demanding protection against AI. And we're talking big names here. Billie Eilish, we've got the estates of Sinatra, Marley.
Wow.
They're all saying, we need some guidelines, we need some rules. And that really struck me because this is about the money side of things now, too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, musicians are already grappling with streaming services that offer like fractions of pennies in royalties.
Yeah.
So imagine AI that can create an infinite amount of music in any artist's style, just flooding the market.
That's terrifying, right?
It's a big concern.
It's like, where's my place in this world if a machine can do it?
Right. And potentially even better or faster.
Exactly. And it's not about, this isn't about banning AI, which I think is an interesting point. It's about saying, look, we need ethical guidelines, we need transparency, and maybe we even need compensation when our work is being used.
Right.
Because, let's be honest, none of this is happening in a vacuum.
Exactly. Someone's profiting off of this.
Yeah.
And I think the question of how do you begin to regulate a technology that is evolving so rapidly? It's like a runaway train.
Yes, it's moving so fast. It's
Yeah.
like, how do you even put rules on something when the rules are going to be irrelevant next week?
Right. And it brings up really complicated questions of who owns a style, Like a style is something that is developed over time. It's influenced by hundreds of things.
You're a product of everything that came before you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But how do you parse that out?
Well, and that actually leads perfectly to this NPR article I was reading.
Yeah.
It was talking about how artists are starting to fight back with their own tech, which I think is really interesting.
Oh, I love that.
They've got programs like Glaze and Nightshade and Kuduru, which essentially mess with AI's ability to learn their style and create copies.
It's like digital camouflage for your art. So instead of passively accepting this technology, these artists are really taking control of the narrative, right? They're experimenting, they're even using AI as a weapon.
Yeah, it's like an arms race of creativity. Instead
Yes,
of bigger bombs, it's cooler algorithms, which is kind of amazing when you think about it.
it's true.
Although I have to say, some AI-generated images I've seen, I don't know, there's just something a little, I don't know,
Off.
off. Yeah. Like almost human, but not quite.
Yeah, it's like the uncanny valley effect. Like,
Yeah.
it's close enough to human to be recognizable, but it's different enough to be a little unsettling.
It's unsettling. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And maybe that's part of the reason why we're still so drawn to art made by actual humans, right?
Yeah.
Because it reflects our imperfections, it reflects our emotions, and just our own unique way of seeing the world.
And that's a really insightful point because it brings us to this idea of human intelligence art,
Yeah.
which is really a direct response to all of this.
Yeah.
It's emphasizing the irreplaceable value of human experience and emotion infused into a piece of art.
And they have the little badges. You can get a badge for your art now. This was made by a human.
It's like a badge of honor.
I love that. This is 100% human made. Thank you very much. And it's interesting. It does make you wonder, are we going to get to a point where labeling becomes mandatory? Like,
Right.
is that
It's very possible. I mean, transparency is going to be crucial, especially as the technology gets better and better, because as consumers, we have a right to know if what we're connecting with is a human being or an algorithm.
right?
Right.
Right, exactly. Because at a certain point, if you can't tell the difference,
Right.
what are we even doing here?
Exactly.
It's easy to get really caught up in the anxieties around all of this. But what about the potential for collaboration, for innovation? I was reading about this artist, I think it was on ArtNet, who's actually using AI as like a jumping off point for his paintings. It's almost like there's this space for the two worlds to not just coexist, but actually make each other cooler.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think we're so early on in this technology. Think about the printing press.
Mm.
Think about the invention of photography.
Yeah.
Those were disruptive, even frightening for some, but they ultimately expanded the possibilities of what art could be.
Totally.
And this might just be the next chapter in that story.
It's true. Instead of fearing the robot, we should maybe be like, what can we do with this?
Exactly.
Yeah, embrace the unknown a little bit, which is scary.
It is scary, but also potentially really exciting.
Totally, totally. One thing I do want to touch on, though, because it keeps coming up, is this whole thing about AI art having this greasy aesthetic. Have you heard people saying that?
Yes. And I think it's totally valid. New art forms always look a little strange, a little bad maybe to audiences at first.
Right.
Our eyes and our minds need time to adjust.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the Impressionists were ridiculed. Photography was dismissed as not being real art.
It's true. It's true.
So this might just be AI art's awkward teenage phase.
It's going through it. It's got growing pains, for sure. So for people who are, maybe a little wary of all this, like, what do we do? How do we navigate this evolving landscape?
Well, I think awareness is key.
Mm.
Pay attention to the artists who are out there experimenting with AI,
Yeah.
who are pushing boundaries. And be mindful of the ethical implication. We talked about that a bit already.
Yeah.
Support artists who are advocating for fair compensation,
Hmm.
for transparency and how their work is being used. Because as consumers, we do have a voice.
Yeah. We vote with our dollars every day.
Exactly.
Okay. But what about the artists who are saying, nope, not for me. I don't want to use AI. I'm not interested in it. Is there still a place for them in this new world?
Absolutely. That desire for human connection, for authentic expression, that's never going away. In fact, the rise of AI might make that human touch even more special, even more valuable.
Totally. It's like, if you could have a million perfect diamonds made in a lab, a flawed natural stone would suddenly become even more beautiful.
Exactly. There will always be an audience that craves that raw emotion, those imperfections, the evidence of a human hand. And that human intelligence movement we were talking about, that's a testament to that.
It's that humanness that, because if AI can replicate any style, what happens to originality? Does that even matter in a world where we're just saturated with this AI-generated content?
That's a big question, and I think philosophers and art critics will be debating that for years to come.
Rightfully so.
Right. But I think one thing to consider is that originality isn't just about technical skill or novelty. It's about the intention behind the work, the context in which it was created, the stories it tells about the human experience.
So even if an AI can perfectly replicate a Van Gogh, it's missing the story of Van Gogh.
Exactly.
It's like if we can have a machine crank out a Van Gogh, does that cheapen the originals? Or
Yeah.
does it make them even more special? I don't know. It's weird.
It really is a fascinating paradox.
True.
Because on one hand, having all this AI-generated art out in the world, it might actually make us appreciate human creativity even more.
Oh, interesting.
Like, imagine if anyone could just, like, whip up an image in the style of Monet or Picasso with AI. Would that make us appreciate the originals even more? Seeing the difference, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Like once you've actually tried to make a perfect souffle from scratch, you appreciate what a pastry chef can do so much more.
Exactly. You suddenly understand the skill and the artistry that goes into it.
Right. You're not just looking at a yummy thing. You're like, this is a feat of engineering.
Totally. But then on the flip side, this also brings up the whole issue of what art is even going to be worth in the future.
Yeah, if anyone can make a Picasso, does anyone even want a real Picasso?
Right. Will the art market need to totally rethink how it defines value?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens.
It's a total head scratcher. Oh, this reminds me. I read this article, I think it was on Medium, where an artist was arguing that AI art shouldn't even be eligible for copyright. They were advocating for like a made by machine label, so you know exactly what you're getting.
Wow. That's radical.
It's pretty out there.
Yeah. And it speaks to a very real fear that artists have about, protecting their work, their income. But then it also makes you think, are we censoring a new form of art? Who gets to decide what's art and what's not?
It's like we're right back to the beginning, trying to define what even is art, just with machines involved this time.
And that's what makes this whole thing so compelling, right? It's not just about the technology. It's about how we relate to creativity, to authorship, to what it even means to be human.
Big questions. So where do we go from here? What are we supposed to do with all this, like swirling in our brains now?
I think the next time you see a piece of art, whether it's online, in a gallery, wherever, take a second. Think about where it came from. Was it a human pouring their heart and soul into it?
Mm.
Or an algorithm? And ask yourself, what is it about the piece that speaks to you? What do you connect with?
Yeah, what's the story it's telling, even if it's not a literal story?
Exactly.
Love it. So maybe instead of feeling AI, we can try to be a little more curious about it.
Yes. Engage with it thoughtfully.
Pretty cool.
Yes. And who knows, maybe we'll even find ways to create amazing art with it.
Maybe the robots aren't going to take over the world, but make it a little more artful.
I like that.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive, you guys, from like lawsuits to like the meaning of life.
We really covered it all.
And we've only just scratched the surface. So to our listeners, stay curious, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to form your own opinions because the future is being written right now.
That's right. And we want to hear from you. What do you think? Hit us up on social media and let us know your take on all things art and AI.
Until next time, keep those creative sparks flying.